Hey, business law students, how's it going? This is week 6. Let's dive in. We're looking at chapters 26, 27, and 28 this week. So make sure you read those full chapters. But we're going to be discussing the different types of partnerships and different types of corporations and how to form them, and that sort of looking at nonprofits and for-profit companies, all around the whole topic of what are the legal ramifications. Let's dive in. Factors to consider when forming a business. Let's look at that. So, some things you want to consider when you form a business. If you've not done that before, it's a great exercise to do. But things to consider would be, ease of the organization, the cost of starting up, legal implications, tax considerations, all that sort of thing. Other factors for considerations. Who's going to own it? How many owners? Do you trust the people you're in ownership with? You're going to have a contract with them. So are you going to go public sometime in the future with an IPO, initial public offering, or something like that? And how is the ownership of the business going to be transferred if it is transferred someday? How is that going to look? Some other things like what about continuity or succession planning? Who's going to take over the business if you can't run it anymore, or if it's a partnership, if your partners can't run it anymore? The business that I'm in, that I'm employed by, a U.S. staffing agency, is formed as a LLC by some brothers. So they are all owners in it, and they have their own continuity plan. So, yeah, that works for them. What about these different types of partnerships that are out there? So there's two different main kinds of partnerships. There's trading partnerships and non-trading partnerships. Really simple to remember. Trading partnerships trade goods, commercial items. All right. Non-trading partnership are things like services, professional purposes, like services. Like the business we're in is a professional, where we provide employment for people. We help find them employment. That is a professional service. Let's see. Then there are a number of different kinds of partnerships. There's the general partnership, where somebody, there's a partner and they're fully active, they're known to the public. There's also the silent partner, where they're known to management but not known to the public. Secret partner, my favorite, the dormant partner, basically the do-nothing partner. They're not known to the public, and they're inactive in management. They just made some investment. And then in the limited partnership, maybe there's a partner who hasn't given as much in terms of capital to get it going as the other partners, so they'd be limited in their voting power and their exercise of authority. All right, let's take a peek at some steps to form corporations. I've actually done this, and I'll talk to you about it as I go. But we formed a Christian daycare in my town. So, and I did all the legal work, worked with an attorney to get it done. So anyways, a corporation is a legal entity. It's created by permission of the government. The entity itself is kind of like a pretend person. They're like, as they say here, an artificial person with a particular name. And that artificial person, that corporation, can buy and sell and be sued and sue and borrow money just like any other person could do. Now, corporations are usually classified as either public or private. I think you know that. Public examples would be, public utility companies, state universities. Generally think about it like this. Public companies are owned by the government, if you will. Okay. So private companies are divided into both profit and non-profit. At U.S. Staffing, where I work, we are a for-profit company. My guess is many of where you work are also for-profit companies. If you work at a Chick-fil-A, for example, it's a for-profit company. But if you work for a daycare, like the one that we started, it'd be a nonprofit. If you work for a church or a ministry, considered nonprofit. All right, so profit corporations come in different flavors, and they are organized to earn a profit. So they're all about, they got to make money. But remember, I'm going to take you back for a moment. Back to Business 101, and then also back to week 1 of our conversation about profit in companies. Corporations cannot be just about profit. So they also have to remember the triple bottom line. There's you got to make a profit. So there's earnings. You got to take care of the environment. That's expected now. And then also you have to adopt some sort of social cause that you have to get behind. So those are the 3 expectations of companies anymore. It can't be just about profit. Well, what about nonprofits? So nonprofits, best way to remember them, they're not designed for profit. All right. Now they can make margin. In other words, their revenue ought to exceed their expenses, so they can take that extra revenue, if it's turned into cash, and tuck it away for when times get rough, like it did during COVID. At our daycare center, we're organized as a nonprofit corporation, but yet we make margin most months. We did not make margin. We did not have positive margin during the COVID down period, but we did qualify and took PPP money, all right, because we were a corporation, so we took advantage of those government loans to help us make payroll, pay our employees, and continue on. But other examples of nonprofits would be things like churches, religious organizations, a lot of hospitals, community hospitals, veterans organizations, and that sort of thing. So when you form a corporation, it's really under state laws, not federal law, it's state law. You have to have an articles of incorporation, bylaws. If you do stock, you have to have some sort of discussion about stock, how you're going to raise capital, all those things. I did put in the materials for success in this week's module, underneath the materials for success in this week's module, a sample of a bylaw and the articles of incorporation. I didn't include those, I could, but anyways, there's the bylaws there for the Jackson Christian Early Learning Center, which is the daycare that we call. It's a DBA. It goes by God's Garden. We formed it 5 years ago, and it's still going strong and doing well. But take a look at those bylaws if you want just an example. All right, government regulation of business. That even hurts to say it, but yes, it has to happen. Government regulation is a way of life. It is designed to protect private enterprises, and I would say it's designed to protect citizens as well. So there's a protection of rights that goes along with this regulation. That plays both for both the organization or the corporation, partnerships and whatnot, and citizens of the country. So it works both ways. Now, the authority of government to regulate business is identified in the U.S. Constitution underneath the Commerce Clause, and that same clause gives the power to the government to form police and to do intrastate and interstate commerce. All right, what's the difference between intrastate and interstate commerce? So interstate commerce happens within your state, intra. So intrastate commerce, for example, in Arizona, maybe there's a small chain of restaurants that are within Arizona. That would be intrastate commerce, for example. There would be maybe there's a diner in your town where people go. That's intrastate. People come from around that town to go to it. Interstate commerce crosses lines. A lot of franchises are interstate commerce because they go across different parts. McDonald's is probably a good example of interstate commerce and that sort of thing. Okay, so Congress, fortunately or unfortunately, has almost unlimited authority to control business, but it must be reasonable and does not violate anyone's constitutional rights. So if you're paying attention to the news, the big thing in the news now, and this might date this video, there's a lot of discussion going on right now about the breakup of big tech. There's discussion about breaking up Google, breaking up Amazon, much like what happened in the 90s with Microsoft, even though Microsoft never really got busted up. But it's not unheard of for Congress to claim monopoly and that companies are monopoly and require them to break up. We'll see. It's a big part of politics right now, so it'll be interesting to see how that works out. Okay, that's it. Make sure you're catching the weekly devotionals. Make sure you're doing your discussion questions, which are the initial ones are due on Wednesday night and Friday night, and then 3 other replies by Sunday night. Quiz and assignments by Sunday night. Remember, God loves you. He's always been on his throne, and he's always going to be there.